Maya thought she was just attending her best friend's wedding as a bridesmaid, but when the photographer deliberately left her out of every single shot, she had no idea that one phone call would turn the entire celebration upside down and force everyone to see her in a completely different light. Maya Rodriguez had been looking forward to this day for months. As she stood in front of her bedroom mirror that Saturday morning, carefully applying the last touches of mascara, she couldn't help but smile at her reflection. Today, her childhood best friend Jessica was getting married, and Maya had the honor of being a bridesmaid. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pale pink dress hung perfectly on her petite frame, though she'd had to have it altered twice to fit properly. At 5'2" with naturally curvy hips, Maya always struggled to find formal wear that didn't require adjustments. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant updo that had taken her an hour to perfect, and she'd splurged on professional makeup for the first time in years. Maya lived in a modest studio apartment on the east side of town, working as a kindergarten teacher at Lincoln Elementary. She drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and shopped at discount stores, but she was genuinely happy with her simple life. Teaching children brought her joy that no amount of money could buy, and she'd never felt envious of those who had more than her. She'd known Jessica since they were 7 years old, when Jessica's family had moved to the neighborhood. They'd been inseparable throughout elementary school, bonding over shared lunches and playground adventures. Even when Jessica's family moved to the wealthy Riverside district during high school, their friendship had endured. Over the years, Maya had watched Jessica's world expand into circles she could never afford to enter. Private schools, expensive vacations, designer clothes, and eventually an Ivy League education that Maya could only dream of. But Jessica had always made an effort to include Maya, inviting her to birthday parties and family gatherings despite the obvious economic differences. When Jessica had gotten engaged to David Wellington, heir to a prominent real estate empire, Maya had been genuinely thrilled. She'd seen how happy David made Jessica, and that was all that mattered to her. When Jessica asked her to be a bridesmaid, Maya had accepted immediately, even though she knew the expenses would stretch her teacher's salary thin. Maya grabbed her small purse and the bridesmaid gift she'd carefully chosen and wrapped. It wasn't expensive, just a personalized photo album filled with pictures of her and Jessica throughout their friendship. But she'd put hours of thought and love into creating it. She hoped Jessica would treasure it as much as Maya treasured their memories. The drive to Grandview Manor took 40 minutes through winding country roads. Maya had never been to such an exclusive venue before. The estate sprawled across rolling hills with perfectly manicured gardens and a stone mansion that looked like something from a fairy tale. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, and Maya felt suddenly self-conscious about her modest vehicle among the BMWs and Mercedes. Inside the bridal suite, Maya found organized chaos. Jessica was surrounded by her 4 other bridesmaids, a team of hairstylists, makeup artists, and her mother, all bustling around ensuring every detail was perfect. The room smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Jessica looked absolutely radiant in her custom-designed gown, which Maya knew had cost more than she made in 6 months. The other bridesmaids, Maya noticed, all seemed to know each other well. They were Jessica's sorority sisters from college and her co-workers from the marketing firm where she worked after graduation. Maya recognized the dynamic immediately. These women came from Jessica's new world, the world of country clubs and charity galas and weekend trips to the Hamptons. They were polite to Maya, but kept their conversations focused on people and places she'd never heard of. Throughout the morning preparation, Maya tried to participate in the chatter, but she felt increasingly like an outsider. When the other bridesmaids discussed their upcoming vacation to Europe together, Maya smiled and listened, knowing she couldn't afford such luxuries. When they talked about mutual friends from their exclusive social circle, Maya nodded politely while feeling completely lost. Jessica seemed oblivious to the subtle exclusion, caught up in the whirlwind of her wedding day preparations. Maya didn't want to burden her friend with complaints about feeling left out, so she focused on being helpful wherever she could. The photographer arrived as they were finishing their preparations. Marcus Chen was apparently one of the most sought-after wedding photographers in the city, charging thousands of dollars for his services. He was tall and impeccably dressed, carrying expensive equipment and an air of artistic importance. Marcus immediately began directing the bridal party for photos. Maya noticed how his eyes swept over the group, lingering on each bridesmaid with an appraising look. When his gaze reached her, she saw something shift in his expression. It was subtle, but Maya had experienced that look before, the moment when someone decided she didn't quite fit their vision of perfection. The first few photos went normally. Marcus arranged them in various poses around the elegant bridal suite, capturing the excitement and beauty of the morning. Maya smiled genuinely, thrilled to be part of Jessica's special day, and assuming these photos would become treasured memories. Then something strange began to happen. As Marcus continued shooting, Maya realized she was being subtly maneuvered to the edges of every shot. When the group clustered around Jessica, Maya found herself pushed to the back where she was barely visible. When they posed by the window, Marcus would adjust the positioning until Maya was partially obscured by other bridesmaids. At first, Maya thought it might be coincidental. Maybe Marcus was just particular about composition and lighting. But as the session continued, the pattern became undeniable. In group shots, Maya was consistently placed where shadows fell on her face or where other people blocked her from view. The other bridesmaids seemed oblivious to what was happening, caught up in their own excitement and the glamour of the professional photo shoot. Jessica was focused on her own appearance and the overwhelming emotions of her wedding day preparations. Maya tried to speak up once, gently suggesting a different position when she found herself completely hidden behind two other bridesmaids. Marcus barely acknowledged her comment, making a dismissive adjustment that still left her partially concealed. The hurt began to build in her chest, but she told herself she was being too sensitive. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe this was just how professional photographers worked, and she didn't understand the artistic process. But when Marcus had them move to the garden for outdoor shots, his bias became impossible to ignore. As they posed among the roses, Maya found herself consistently placed at angles where she was turned away from the camera or blocked by foliage. In one particularly beautiful shot with the entire bridal party arranged on the stone steps of the manor, Marcus directed Maya to stand behind a pillar where only her arm was visible. The other bridesmaids were laughing and posing naturally, all of them clearly visible and beautifully lit in every shot. Maya felt increasingly invisible, like a ghost haunting the edges of someone else's celebration. When they moved inside for photos in the grand ballroom, Maya's worst confirmed. Marcus was now openly excluding her from shots, directing the other bridesmaids to form groups that naturally left no space for her. When she tried to join a pose, he would suggest she step back to balance the composition or move to a position where she was completely out of frame. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be the final group photo of the bridal party. Marcus arranged Jessica and her 5 bridesmaids in a perfect semicircle with the bride glowing in the center. Maya approached to take her place in the formation, but Marcus held up his hand. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying just enough authority to stop her in her tracks, "I think the composition works better with just the 5. The symmetry is more pleasing to the eye." Maya felt her face flush with embarrassment and confusion. She looked at Jessica, hoping her friend would intervene, but she was adjusting her veil and seemed not to have heard Marcus's comment over the general bustle of activity. The other bridesmaids exchanged glances. Maya caught a look that passed between two of them, a subtle eye roll that suggested they weren't entirely surprised by Marcus's decision. In that moment, Maya realized that while she might have been imagining the extent of the exclusion, she hadn't been imagining it entirely. "Just wait over there," Marcus said dismissively, gesturing toward a corner of the room. "We'll be done in a few minutes." Maya stood frozen for a moment, feeling the weight of humiliation settle over her like a heavy blanket. She was being explicitly excluded from the photos that would capture this milestone moment in her best friend's wedding day. Years from now, when Jessica looks back at her wedding album,
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya forced a smile, not wanting to ruin Jessica's day with her complaints. "I'm fine, just excited for you." But Jessica knew her too well. "Something's wrong. What happened?" Maya hesitated, then decided to be honest. "The photographer has been leaving me out of most of the photos. Just now, he excluded me completely from the final bridesmaid group shot." Jessica's face showed genuine confusion and concern. "What? That can't be right. Why would he do that?" Before Maya could answer, Marcus approached them, his camera equipment packed and ready for the ceremony setup. "Ladies, we should move along. The ceremony starts in an hour, and I need to position myself for the processional shots." Jessica turned to him with a frown. "Marcus, my friend here says you've been excluding her from the bridal party photos. Is that true?" Marcus's expression remained professionally neutral, but Maya caught a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "I make artistic decisions based on composition, lighting, and overall aesthetic. Not every shot works with every person in it. It's nothing personal." "But she's one of my bridesmaids," Jessica said, her voice rising slightly. "She should be in the group photos." Marcus shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation, but unwilling to admit fault. "The shots I got will be beautiful. Trust me. I'm the professional here. I know what works and what doesn't." Maya felt her cheeks burn with shame. Even though Jessica was defending her, the implication was clear. According to Marcus's professional judgment, Maya didn't work. She didn't fit the aesthetic. She wasn't beautiful enough, or elegant enough, or worthy enough to be included in the visual story of this day. Jessica looked between Maya and Marcus, clearly torn between supporting her friend and avoiding conflict on her wedding day. Maya could see the stress building in Jessica's expression, and the last thing she wanted was to cause problems for the bride. "It's okay, Jess," Maya said quietly. "Let's not worry about it today. You have more important things to focus on." But the damage was done. As they walked toward the ceremony site, Maya felt like she was drowning in her own inadequacy. She'd always known she came from a different world than Jessica's new friends, but she'd never felt so explicitly rejected because of it. The wedding ceremony was beautiful, held in the manor's rose garden, with the bride and groom exchanging vows under an arch of white flowers. Maya stood with the other bridesmaids, smiling and trying to look happy while feeling increasingly disconnected from the celebration. During the reception, Maya found herself largely ignored by the other members of the wedding party. She sat at the bridesmaids' table, making polite conversation, while they discussed inside jokes and shared memories she wasn't part of. She watched as Marcus continued to photograph the celebration, capturing candid moments in group shots that somehow never seemed to include her. As the evening progressed, Maya's hurt transformed into something deeper. This wasn't just about one photographer's bias or one group of women being cliquish. This was about a fundamental rejection of who she was, a message that people like her didn't belong in spaces like this. She thought about leaving early, claiming a headache or some other excuse. But this was Jessica's day, and despite everything, she loved her friend and wanted to be there for her. So she stayed, smiling when appropriate and dancing when asked, all while feeling increasingly invisible. The final straw came during the bouquet toss. As all the single women gathered on the dance floor, Maya found herself pushed to the back of the crowd by the other bridesmaids, who seemed to coordinate their positioning without including her in their whispered plans. When Jessica threw the bouquet, it sailed over Maya's head toward the women in front, and the resulting photo showed Maya barely visible in the background. Standing there in that crowded room, surrounded by celebration and joy, Maya had never felt more alone. She excused herself and stepped outside onto the manor's terrace, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she rarely used, the one that connected her to a part of her life she kept carefully separate from everything else. Her thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment, knowing that making this call would change everything. But she was tired of being invisible, tired of being treated as less than, tired of pretending that her feelings didn't matter. Maya pressed the call button and waited for the familiar voice to answer. "Hi, Gad," she said quietly when the call connected. "I need you to come get me. Something's happened, and I can't handle this alone anymore." The voice that answered Maya's call was warm and concerned, exactly as she remembered from childhood when she'd scratched her knee or had a bad day at school. "Maya, what's wrong, sweetheart?" "I'm at Jessica's wedding, and I just need to get out of here. Can you send a car?" Maya's voice cracked despite her efforts to sound composed. "Absolutely not. I'm coming myself. Send me the address." There was rustling in the background, the sound of keys being grabbed and doors opening. "Are you hurt? Do I need to bring security?" "No, Dad, nothing like that. I just feel so humiliated and small, and I can't pretend everything's fine anymore." 20 minutes. Stay exactly where you are." Maya hung up and remained on the terrace, watching the celebration continue through the French doors. Jessica was radiant on the dance floor with David, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded earlier. The other bridesmaids were laughing and taking selfies, their perfect smiles capturing memories Maya would never be part of. She thought about the last time she'd called her father for help. It had been 3 years ago, when her apartment had been broken into and she'd been too shaken to handle the police report alone. Before that, it had been her college graduation, when she'd wanted him there but asked him to keep a low profile so her friends wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. Maya had made a conscious choice early in her adult life to build her own path, separate from her father's world. She'd seen too many people change their behavior around her when they discovered who her father was, and she'd wanted genuine relationships based on who she was, not what she represented. Teaching had been the perfect career for that goal. Elementary school children didn't care about corporate hierarchies or family wealth. They just wanted someone who would read them stories, help them tie their shoes, and celebrate their small victories. Maya's colleagues knew her as the dedicated teacher who spent her own money on classroom supplies and stayed late to tutor struggling students. Now, standing on this elegant terrace in her pale pink bridesmaid's dress, Maya wondered if her determination to remain independent had been worth the cost. She'd spent years proving she could make it on her own, but she'd also spent years feeling like she had to earn her place in every room she entered. The sound of helicopter rotors interrupted her thoughts. Maya looked up to see aircraft lights cutting through the evening sky, growing steadily brighter as they approached. Several wedding guests had wandered onto the terrace and were pointing at the sky with curiosity and concern. Is that part of the entertainment? I don't think so.
Wedding helicopters usually don't fly this low over the venue. The helicopter circled once before settling onto the manor's expansive lawn, its rotors whipping the carefully arranged garden lights and sending white linens from nearby tables dancing through the air. The string quartet stopped playing, and conversations throughout the reception ground to a halt. Maya felt her stomach tighten with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Her father had always been dramatic, but this was beyond anything she'd expected. She'd assumed he would send his driver in one of his understated luxury cars. A helicopter landing in the middle of a wedding reception was going to create exactly the kind of attention she'd spent years trying to avoid. The aircraft's door opened, and Maya watched her father step onto the grass with the confident stride she remembered from childhood. At 62, Robert Chen still commanded attention wherever he went. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the helicopter ride, and his tailored black suit looked like it had just come from the cleaners. Maya hadn't seen him in person for 6 months, though they spoke on the phone regularly. Looking at him now, she was struck by how much he resembled the powerful businessman the world knew him to be, rather than the gentle father who had raised her after her mother's death when she was 12. Robert walked across the lawn toward the manor, ignoring the stares and whispered conversations erupting around him. Wedding guests were pulling out their phones, some to record the unexpected arrival and others to frantically search for information about who might warrant such a dramatic entrance. Maya met him at the edge of the terrace, and his expression immediately softened when he saw her face. "There's my girl. What happened?" "The photographer excluded me from all the wedding photos because I don't fit his aesthetic vision," Maya said quietly. "And Jessica's new friends have been treating me like I'm invisible all day. I just felt so worthless." Robert's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "You are many things, Maya Chen, but worthless is not one of them. Show me this photographer." Maya glanced back through the French doors and spotted Marcus near the cake table, his camera trained on the newlyweds as they prepared for the cake-cutting ceremony. "The tall guy with the expensive camera equipment? But Dad, please don't make a scene. This is Jessica's day." "This became my concern the moment someone decided my daughter wasn't good enough to be photographed," Robert said firmly. "But don't worry, I'll handle this appropriately." They walked back into the reception together, and Maya watched as recognition began to dawn on faces throughout the crowd. Robert Chen wasn't just wealthy, he was one of the most influential business leaders in the state. His tech company had revolutionized data security for major corporations, and his philanthropic foundation had funded dozens of schools and hospitals. Maya saw Harold Wellington, David's father and the owner of Wellington Real Estate, nearly choke on his champagne when he spotted Robert. Harold quickly began making his way across the room, his face pale with what looked like panic. "Mr. Chen," Harold said breathlessly when he reached them, "what an unexpected pleasure. I had no idea you would be attending the wedding." "I wasn't invited," Robert replied calmly. "I'm here because my daughter called me." Harold's confused gaze shifted to Maya, and she watched his expression change as he processed the information. Maya Chen. Robert Chen. The pieces were falling into place, and Harold looked like he might be sick. "Your daughter is the teacher," Harold said weakly. "My daughter is many things. Teacher, volunteer, the kindest person I know, and apparently someone who's been treated poorly at your son's wedding." Jessica and David had noticed the commotion and were approaching with curious expressions. Jessica's face lit up when she saw Robert, though she looked puzzled by his presence. "Mr. Chen! Maya, you didn't tell me your father was coming," Jessica said with genuine delight. She'd met Robert several times over the years and had always been charmed by his warmth toward Maya. "I wasn't planning to attend," Robert said diplomatically, "but Maya called me because she was upset about how she's been treated today, specifically by your photographer." Jessica's file faltered as she looked between Maya and her father. "What do you mean?" Maya felt all eyes on her and wished she could disappear. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd spent years avoiding. "It's not a big deal, Jess. Let's just forget about it." "It is a big deal," Robert said firmly. "Maya was systematically excluded from your wedding photos because the photographer decided she didn't meet his standards. She's been made to feel unwelcome and unworthy at what should have been a celebration of friendship." David stepped forward, his face showing confusion and growing concern. "I don't understand. Maya's been Jessica's friend since childhood. Why would anyone exclude her from photos?" Marcus had noticed the growing crowd and approached with his camera still in hand. Maya watched his confident expression falter when he realized he was the subject of discussion.
"Are you the photographer?" Robert asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him successful in business. "Yes, sir. Marcus Chen. Marcus Liu." Marcus stumbled over his words, clearly recognizing Robert and realizing his mistake in sharing a surname. "Interesting coincidence," Robert said dryly. "My daughter tells me you've been excluding her from the wedding photos. Is that accurate?" Marcus glanced around at the growing crowd of wedding guests, all of whom were now focused on the unfolding drama. "I make artistic decisions based on composition and lighting. Every photographer has to make choices about what works best for each shot. And your artistic decision was that my daughter didn't work best for any shot? I was hired to create beautiful, cohesive images for the wedding album. Sometimes that means making difficult choices about positioning and grouping." "I see. And your definition of beautiful apparently doesn't include accomplished, intelligent women who happen to come from modest backgrounds." Maya cringed at the public nature of the confrontation, but she could see that her father was just getting started. She'd witnessed this side of him in business meetings when someone had underestimated him or treated his employees poorly. "Mr. Chen," Marcus tried again, "I assure you there was nothing personal about my decisions. I was simply doing my job." "Your job was to photograph the wedding party, which included my daughter. Instead, you made judgments about her worth based on her appearance and background. That's not artistic vision, that's discrimination." Jessica stepped forward, her face showing growing understanding and horror. "Marcus, is this true? Did you deliberately exclude Maya from the photos?" Marcus looked trapped, glancing between the bride, her father-in-law, and the man who was clearly much more powerful than anyone had realized.
"Show me the photos," Robert said calmly. Marcus hesitated, then reluctantly pulled out his camera and began scrolling through the images on the display screen. Maya watched her father's expression grow colder as he reviewed shot after shot where she was either absent, obscured, or positioned unfavorably. "This one," Robert said, stopping at the final group photo of the bridesmaids. "Where is my daughter in this image?" "She's not in that particular shot, but there are other photos where she's included. Show me one where she's prominently featured alongside the other bridesmaids." Marcus scrolled through his images, his face growing redder as he realized what Robert already knew. There weren't any such photos. Harold Wellington stepped forward, clearly desperate to contain the situation. "Mr. Chen, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Marcus is a respected professional, and I'm certain he didn't intend any offense." "The intent is irrelevant," Robert replied. "The impact is what matters. My daughter was humiliated and excluded from documenting one of the most important days in her best friend's life." Jessica was now looking at Marcus with undisguised anger. "How could you do this? Maya is one of my dearest friends. She should be in every group photo." David nodded in agreement, his business training helping him recognize the seriousness of the situation. "This is completely unacceptable, Marcus. You owe Maya an apology, and you need to fix this immediately." Marcus looked around at hostile faces surrounding him, clearly realizing that his career might be in jeopardy. "I apologize if my artistic choices caused any offense. Perhaps we could arrange some additional photos to include everyone more prominently." "Perhaps," Robert's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Let me be clear about what's going to happen. You're going to reshoot every single group photo from today, ensuring my daughter is prominently included. You're going to do it right now before any of these guests leave. And you're going to do it with the same enthusiasm and professionalism you showed for the original shots." Marcus nodded quickly, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "Of course, sir. Whatever you'd like." "Furthermore," Robert continued, "you're going to provide an additional set of individual portraits of Maya, at no charge, as compensation for the distress you've caused her today." Maya felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment at the public spectacle, but she also felt something else she hadn't experienced in years. She felt protected, valued, worthy of being defended. Jessica grabbed Maya's hand and squeezed it tightly. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I had no idea this was happening. I was so caught up in everything else that I didn't notice." "It's okay, Jess. It's your wedding day." "No, it's not okay," Jessica said firmly. "You're important to me, and you should have been treated with respect from the very beginning." Over the next hour, Marcus reshoot every group photo from the day. This time, Maya was positioned prominently in each shot, with careful attention paid to lighting and composition that highlighted her natural beauty. The other bridesmaids, who had initially seemed annoyed by the delay, gradually warmed to the process as they realized the gravity of what had happened. Robert stayed for the entire reshoot, making quiet conversation with other guests who approached him with curiosity and respect. Maya watched him charm Jessica's grandmother, discuss business with David's colleagues, and compliment the venue staff on their excellent service. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Harold Wellington approached Robert one final time. "Mr. Chen, I hope there are no hard feelings about tonight's misunderstanding." "There are no hard feelings toward you, Harold. Your son's wedding was beautiful, and Jessica is a lovely bride. But I hope you'll remember that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their background or appearance." Harold nodded emphatically, clearly relieved that his business relationship with such a powerful man hadn't been damaged by the evening's events. As they prepared to leave, Jessica pulled Maya aside for a private conversation. "I can't believe you never told me who your father was." Maya smiled sadly. "I wanted our friendship to be about us, not about what my family could do for you. I've seen too many relationships change when people find out about the money." "Our friendship would never change because of that," Jessica said sincerely. "But I understand why you kept it private. I just wish you'd felt comfortable enough to call him sooner when things got bad." "I wanted to handle it myself. I always want to handle things myself." Jessica hugged her tightly. "You don't have to handle everything alone, Maya. That's what friends and family are for." As Maya and Robert walked toward the helicopter, she felt emotionally drained but oddly liberated. For years, she'd carried the burden of proving herself worthy of respect and inclusion. Tonight, she'd learned that sometimes it was okay to accept help, to let someone else fight for her worth. "Thank you for coming," Maya said as they settled into the helicopter seats. "Thank you for calling. I've been waiting years for you to let me be your father again, instead of just your polite acquaintance." Maya laughed despite her exhaustion. "I never stopped needing you. I just thought I had to prove I could survive without you." "You can survive without me. You've proven that beautifully. But you shouldn't have to." As the helicopter lifted off and the lights of Grandview Manor grew smaller below them, Maya reflected on the evening's events. She thought about Marcus, who would probably think twice about making assumptions about people based on their appearance. She thought about the other bridesmaids, who had witnessed firsthand what exclusion looked like, and might be more conscious of it in the future. Most importantly, she thought about herself and the lessons she'd learned about accepting help and standing up for her own worth. 6 months later, Maya received a package in the mail. Inside was a beautiful wedding album, professionally bound and filled with the reshoot photos from Jessica's wedding. In every image, Maya was prominently featured, smiling genuinely alongside her friend and the other bridesmaids. Tucked inside the front cover was a note from Jessica. "For my dearest friend, who taught me that true beauty comes from character, not circumstances. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Maya displayed the photos proudly in her small apartment, no longer feeling the need to hide any part of her life or her family. She'd learned that respect wasn't something she had to earn through perfect behavior or modest invisibility. It was something she deserved simply by being human. And sometimes when people failed to recognize her worth on their own, it was perfectly acceptable to remind them who she was and what she deserved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.